First contact in the frost. The crunch of ice beneath Dr. Sarah Chen's boots echoed through the crystalline caverns of Proxima. Her research expedition had taken an unexpected turn when her instruments detected unusual heat signatures deep within the planet's frozen crust. The geology of this ice world had already yielded fascinating discoveries, but something about these readings felt different. Sarah adjusted her thermal suit's settings as she navigated deeper into the winding passages. The walls gleamed with an otherworldly blue phosphorescence, casting dancing shadows that played tricks with her depth perception. Her breath fogged inside her helmet as she checked her scanner again. The heat signature was stronger now, more focused. "Base, are you reading these thermal patterns?" she transmitted, her voice steady despite her growing excitement. "They're too regular to be geothermal." Static crackled before Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through. "Affirmative, Sarah. But we're picking up some unusual electromagnetic interference. Maybe you should." The transmission cut off as Sarah rounded a corner and froze. Before her lay a chamber unlike anything in their survey maps. The ice here had been deliberately carved, forming smooth geometric patterns that could only be artificial. But what caught her attention was the figure slumped against the far wall. It wasn't human. The being's silvery skin had a metallic sheen, and its proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too angular. Multiple arms were wrapped around its torso in what Sarah recognized as a universal gesture of pain or distress. What appeared to be frost had formed across its exposed skin, creating intricate patterns that might have been beautiful if they weren't clearly killing it. The being's eyes opened, all four of them, and fixed on Sarah. They glowed with an inner light that was rapidly dimming. A rattling sound emerged from what she assumed was its throat, and her suit's translator struggled to process the unfamiliar language. End comes. As is proper, strength fails. Sarah's medical training kicked in, overriding her shock at first contact happening in an ice cave. She rushed forward, already pulling out her emergency thermal blanket. "I'm here to help. Please, let me help you." The alien tried to wave her away with one of its four arms. "No, tradition demands. The weak perish." "Well, my traditions say something different," Sarah replied firmly, activating the thermal blanket and wrapping it around the alien's shoulders. She noted how its silvery skin had turned almost translucent in places, signs of severe hypothermia, assuming its biology was anything like Earth's. As she worked, Sarah pieced together the alien story through its fragmented speech. It was a meridian, part of a species that valued strength above all else. When age or injury diminished their capabilities, tradition demanded they seek out an honorable death in isolation. This elder had chosen the ice caves of Proxima as their final resting place. "Your people do not understand." The meridian wheezed as Sarah administered emergency first aid. "Weakness must be purged. Where I come from, we believe wisdom has its own kind of strength," Sarah replied, checking the alien's vital signs with her modified scanner. "And letting someone die alone in a cave. That's not strength. That's waste." The meridian's inner glow flickered, but steadied as Sarah's treatments began to take effect. "I am Kavoth. Why do you persist?" "Dr. Sarah Chen," she introduced herself, adjusting the thermal blanket. "And I persist because every life has value. Because the strong protecting the vulnerable makes us all stronger. Because meeting someone from another world and letting them die without even trying to help, that would make me feel pretty weak." Kavoth was silent for a long moment, all four eyes studying Sarah with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Finally, the alien spoke again, its voice slightly stronger. "Your ways are strange, Dr. Sarah Chen." "Yeah, we get that a lot." Sarah smiled behind her faceplate. "Now let's get you somewhere warm so we can have a proper first contact discussion. I have about 1,000,000 questions about your people, and I bet you have just as many about humans." As Sarah helped Kavoth to their feet, her communication system crackled back to life. "Dr. Chen, we've been trying to reach you. We're picking up some kind of ship entering orbit, unlike anything we've seen before. Sarah looked at Kavoth, whose eyes had widened at the news. Would those happen to be your people? The Meridian Fleet, Kavoth confirmed. They will not understand your intervention. Well then, Sarah said, supporting the aliens' weight as they began their journey out of the cave, we'll just have to help them understand. After all, that's another human tradition, being really stubborn when we think we're right. Kavoth made a sound that might have been a laugh. Perhaps there is strength in stubbornness too. Together, they emerged from the ice caves into Proxima B's eternal twilight, while above them, the first official contact between humanity and the Meridian Fleet drew ever closer. Sarah knew the real challenge was just beginning, but as she felt Kavoth gradually growing stronger beside her, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest acts of compassion. The price of compassion. The medical bay of Research Station Proxima hummed with activity as Sarah monitored Kavoth's recovery. The Meridian's silvery skin had regained its metallic luster, though ancient scars still traced patterns across their angular frame. Outside the observation window, 3 Meridian warships hung in high orbit, their presence both beautiful and menacing. Your people's medicines are effective, Kavoth acknowledged, flexing their 4 arms experimentally. Though your methods remain peculiar. Sarah checked the latest bioscan results on her tablet. Peculiar how? You expend significant resources preserving those who can no longer contribute optimal value. It defies logic. A burst of chatter from the command center interrupted their conversation. The Meridian Fleet had been broadcasting the same message for hours. Return the Elder for proper dissolution. Further delay will be considered an act of hostility. Your people seem pretty eager to get you back, Sarah observed, adjusting Kavoth's thermal regulators. The Elder's inner light dimmed slightly. They seek to correct an embarrassment. My survival shames them. Kavoth's 4 eyes fixed on Sarah. You do not understand what you've begun, Dr. Chen. The fleet commander is my offspring. Their honor demands they rectify this irregularity. Sarah's hands stilled. Your own child wants to ensure your death. It is our way. The strong lead by removing weakness. Kavoth's voice carried no bitterness, only certainty. By preserving me, you challenge millennia of tradition. The station's alert system blared suddenly. Sarah's tablet lit up with urgent messages. Her eyes widened as she read them. Kavoth, according to these readings, your ships are powering up weapon systems. As expected, they will not permit this violation of our customs to continue. Sarah's mind raced. The research station's defenses were minimal, and the nearest Earth fleet was days away. They had minutes, maybe hours, before diplomacy gave way to violence. But as she looked at Kavoth, seeing not weakness but a repository of knowledge and wisdom, an idea formed. Your people value strength above all else, right? Sarah asked, already reaching for her communications panel. Then let's show them a different kind of strength. Will you help me? Kavoth studied her for a long moment before their inner light brightened with understanding. You wish me to speak to them? Better. Sarah's fingers flew across the console. I want you to teach them. What followed was unlike any first contact scenario humanity had prepared for. Sarah broadcast Kavoth's voice to both the Meridian Fleet and Earth's approaching ships. The Elder spoke for hours, sharing technological insights that had taken their people centuries to discover, explaining the subtleties of Meridian quantum navigation, revealing the locations of resources humanity hadn't even known to look for. The weak perish, Kavoth reminded their people, but wisdom, properly preserved, strengthens all. Would you destroy this knowledge simply because its vessel has aged? Would you prove yourselves strong by refusing to learn? The fleet commander's response came as a shock to everyone, except perhaps Kavoth. The Elder speaks truth we have forgotten. Perhaps there is strength in preservation as well as dissolution. As tension slowly blowed out of the situation, Sarah found Kavoth watching her with all 4 eyes gleaming. You risked much, Dr. Chen. Had they attacked, your station would have been destroyed. Worth it, Sarah replied simply. Sometimes you have to bet everything on the possibility of understanding. A peculiar strategy, Kavoth mused. Yet I begin to see its strength. They turned to gaze out at the now peaceful fleet. My people will not change quickly, but perhaps we can learn to recognize different forms of power. Knowledge, wisdom, compassion. The elder's inner light pulsed warmly. Even stubbornness. Sarah smiled. Speaking of stubborn, wait until you see what humans are like when we're excited about learning something new. Your people aren't going to know what hit them. Indeed. Kavoth's voice carried a note of amusement. I believe I shall stay and observe this cultural exchange. For research purposes, of course. Of course, Sarah agreed. Purely scientific curiosity. Above them, human and Meridian ships began the delicate dance of diplomatic approach, while below, an elderly alien and a human scientist continued their unlikely conversation, proving that sometimes the strongest choice was to simply refuse to give up on someone else. Warriors and healers. Transition talks between humans and Meridians took place in the station's converted cargo bay. Sarah watched Kavoth address the mixed delegation, the elder's voice carrying wisdom earned through centuries. On one side sat the Meridian warriors, their armor gleaming with ceremonial markings. On the other, Earth's diplomatic team looked tiny in comparison, but their eyes shone with determination. Our strength lies not in isolation, but in exchange, Kavoth declared. Humans have shown us that preservation of knowledge can be as vital as martial prowess. Commander Vexthar, Kavoth's offspring, shifted uncomfortably. Their ceremonial armor couldn't hide their inner conflict. The Council of Elders demands proof that this cooperation offers genuine advantage. Sarah stepped forward, activating the holographic display. We've prepared a demonstration. The projection showed a Meridian vessel using modified human medical technology to heal battle damage. Your regenerative capabilities, combined with our adaptive repair systems, create something stronger than either alone. The Meridian warriors stirred, their inner lights flickering with interest. But tradition died hard. You suggest we abandon our ways. One warrior challenged, rising to their full height. That we become soft, like the species that crossed vast distances to find you. Kavoth interrupted. That developed healing arts you never imagined. That chose to save an enemy they'd never met. The elder's inner light pulsed strongly. Tell me, young one, what is harder, to strike down a foe or to lift up a stranger? The warrior sat slowly, chastened but thoughtful. Commander Vexthar studied their parent with new eyes. I was taught that your survival would weaken us, yet your wisdom has opened paths we never saw. They turned to Sarah. Our tactical analysts have reviewed your medical data, the applications for battlefield recovery alone. That's just the beginning, Sarah said. We've barely scratched the surface of what we could learn from each other. The discussions continued late into the station's artificial night. Sarah noticed how the Meridian warriors gradually shifted from rigid postures to engaged attention as humans shared stories of battlefield medics, of soldiers who showed greatest strength in protecting others. Kavoth touched Sarah's shoulder with one gentle hand. They begin to understand. Slowly, but they begin. Understanding's usually slow, Sarah agreed. Worth the wait, though. A commotion at the far end of the cargo bay drew their attention. A young human doctor was explaining emergency medicine to a group of fascinated Meridian warriors, while nearby, a Meridian weapons expert discussed shield harmonics with Earth's engineers. They adapt quickly, Kavoth observed. Both sides. Commander Vexthar approached them, their stance formal but lacking its earlier hostility. Parent Elder, the Council has reviewed our findings. They request your presence, not for dissolution, but for consultation. It seems there is much we must reconsider. Sarah felt Kavoth's inner light brighten. The Council admits need for change. Perhaps we have underestimated their strength as well. As preparations began for Kavoth's historic return, Sarah realized that the real work was just beginning. Changing minds was harder than changing bodies, but watching humans and Meridians cautiously learning to trust each other, she knew some battles were won not with weapons, but with patience, understanding, and the courage to choose a different path. "Your stubbornness is infectious, Dr. Chen," Kavoth commented, watching the Mingle's crews. "Already my people speak of building healing centers alongside our war academies." Sarah smiled. "Just wait until they discover human art and music. Speaking of which, want to explain to them why humans dance?" Kavoth's inner light flickered with what Sarah now recognized as amusement. "Perhaps we should address one cultural shock at a time." The station hummed with activity, a symbol of what was possible when strength meant more than power and wisdom meant more than tradition. Above them, Meridian ships now flew in formation with human vessels, their crews learning that sometimes the bravest act was to reach across the void and grasp an offered hand. The breaking storm. Red alert klaxons shattered the peaceful progress of recent weeks. Sarah burst into the command center to find chaos. A massive Meridian war fleet had just emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing the diplomatic vessels already in orbit. "Unknown fleet bearing down, weapons armed," the station's tactical officer reported. No response to hails. Kavoth's inner light pulsed with recognition. The warrior clans, they would not accept the council's decision. The main screen filled with the imposing figure of war leader Kexthen, their ceremonial armor adorned with battle scars. "This heresy ends now. Surrender the Elder Despoiler and the humans who corrupt our ways." Commander Vexthar stepped forward. "War leader, these humans have shown us new forms of weakness," Kexthen roared. "You shame our ancestors with such talk. The old ways kept us strong for millennia." Sarah watched the tactical display with growing dread. The war fleet's formation was perfect, designed to obliterate both the station and their own diplomatic ships in a single strike. Billions would die in the war that followed. Then she noticed something odd about the enemy fleet's energy signatures. "Kavoth," she whispered, "they're shield harmonics." The elder studied the readings, all four eyes widening. "Primitive. They reject change so completely, they even refuse shield improvements." They turned to Vexthar. "Commander, if we recalibrate our diplomatic vessel's shields using the human modifications." Understanding bloomed. The next few minutes were a blur of activity as human and Meridian engineers worked frantically to implement Kavoth's plan. Above them, the war fleet moved into attack position. "Final warning," Kexthen demanded. "Surrender or—" "No." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "You want to see strength? Watch." The war fleet opened fire, but instead of destruction, their weapons fire was caught and redirected by the modified shields, feeding back into their own ship's systems. Alarms blared across the enemy fleet as systems overloaded. "Impossible," Kexthen raged. "No." Kavoth's voice cut through the chaos. "Evolution. The true strength of any species lies not in rigid adherence to the past, but in the wisdom to adapt." The war fleet hung powerless, their weapons neutralized not by superior force, but by the very innovation they had rejected. Sarah watched as Kavoth and Vexthar began negotiations with the humbled warrior clans. "Your way failed," Kavoth told them. "Perhaps it is time to consider ours." As the crisis diffused, Sarah found herself standing with Kavoth in the observation deck, watching the massive fleet now being guided toward a peaceful resolution. "You know," she said, "on Earth, some of our greatest warriors became our greatest teachers." Kavoth's inner light pulsed warmly. Perhaps it is time the warrior clans learned to teach as well as fight. Together, they watched the stars, knowing that sometimes the strongest victory came not from destroying an enemy, but from turning them into allies instead. A new understanding. 1 year after first contact, the Meridian High Council convened in their newly constructed Hall of Integration on Earth. Kavoth stood before the assembled delegates, their inner light bright with pride as they watched human and Meridian students training together in the courtyard below. Our strength grows not from conquest, but from connection, Kavoth addressed the council. The human concept of mentorship has revolutionized our warrior traditions. The evidence was undeniable. Meridian battle techniques, combined with human medical knowledge, had created a new class of warrior healers. They could both fight and save lives, their modified ships now carrying medical bays alongside weapon systems. Sarah, now Earth's chief xenobiological advisor, smiled as she watched a young Meridian warrior teaching human students about energy manipulation, while a human doctor demonstrated emergency care techniques to Meridian cadets. War leader Kexthen, now wearing the robes of a teacher, approached her. I once thought change meant weakness. Now I see it requires the greatest strength of all. The strength to question everything you believed, Sarah agreed. Kavoth joined them, their aged frame standing straight with renewed purpose. The Council has approved the expansion of the integration program. 10 new facilities will be constructed across both territories. The real victory wasn't in the formal treaties or technological exchanges, but in the small moments. Meridian elders sharing centuries of knowledge instead of seeking honorable deaths. Human and Meridian children playing together in colony schools. Joint research teams making discoveries neither species could have achieved alone. As the sun set on the historic session, Sarah found Kavoth in the memorial garden, where the names of those who died before the peace were honored. You once told me humans were peculiar, Sarah said. Still think so? More than ever, Kavoth responded, their inner light pulsing with affection. But perhaps the universe needs more peculiarity. Above them, ships from both species patrol together, their crews no longer divided by tradition or prejudice. They have found something stronger than ancient laws or cultural barriers. The simple truth that compassion wasn't weakness, change wasn't surrender, and the greatest strength often came from helping others rise alongside you. The story of a human scientist and an abandoned elder had become legend among both species, not as a tale of war or power, but as proof that sometimes the most profound revolutions began with a single act of kindness in an ice cave on a distant world.